You know, when you hear the name Confucius, you probably picture this wise old master, right? Just spouting proverbs. But that's really only the very end of his story. Today, we're going to peel back the layers and look at the man behind the legend, a guy whose life was just packed with ambition, crushing failure, and, honestly, an incredible amount of resilience. So yeah, let's dive into the journey of this sage.
Confucius actually summed up his own life in this one amazing quote. It's like his personal timeline, but instead of jobs or accomplishments, he's tracking his own journey of self-improvement. He says at 15, he decided to get serious about learning, which, hey, might sound a little familiar to some of you. At 30, he felt like he was finally standing on his own 2 feet. By 40, he wasn't confused about his path anymore. And look, this isn't just some dusty old quote. It's a roadmap for personal growth that anyone can learn from. Let's start at the very beginning of his journey.
All right, let's kick things off with Chapter 1, The Ambitious Youth. This is where a young boy decides he's going to change the world, and he starts with himself.
So to really get Confucius, you have to picture the world he was born into. It was China's spring and autumn period, and that name sounds pretty peaceful, but it was anything but. It was total chaos. There was no one strong government, just a bunch of smaller states constantly fighting for power. All this disorder he saw around him, that became the fuel for his entire life's mission, to figure out a way to bring back order and harmony.
Now, what's so interesting about this part of his life is the contrast. At 15, he makes this huge commitment to become a great scholar. But then you look at his early 20s, and he's working these really humble jobs, managing a warehouse, keeping track of livestock. He also deals with some really tough stuff, like his mother passing away, and even getting publicly humiliated, turned away from a party. But through all of that, his commitment to learning never ever wavered.
Let's move on to the next chapter, because this is where all that study starts to pay off. After decades of work, Confucius finally gets his shot to put all his big ideas into action. This is him trying to become the statesman he always knew he could be. And it took him until he was 51 years old. I mean, think about that for a second. Decades of preparation, of building a reputation for being wise and having integrity. But it worked. His knowledge finally landed him one of the most powerful jobs in his home state of Louisiana. It seemed like his life's work was finally about to begin.
So here's the situation. The official ruler of Lu, the Duke, was pretty much just a figurehead. The real power was in the hands of 3 super wealthy, incredibly powerful families. So Confucius comes up with this incredibly bold plan. He's going to literally tear down the walls of their fortified cities. The idea was to strip away their military power and give it back to the Duke. It was a massive gamble, and it completely backfired. The families fought back, hard, and all of a sudden, Confucius had made enemies of the most powerful people in the state.
And just like that, poof, it was all over. At 55 years old, at the absolute peak of his political career, he fails completely. He's forced into exile, a man without a home, and his grand plan for fixing his country is in ruins. So here's a question for all of us. What do you do when your life's big plan just falls apart? Well, for Confucius, this wasn't the end. It was actually the beginning of his greatest test.
And this kicks off what is, without a doubt, the toughest chapter of his life, the wandering exile. We're not talking about a short trick here. For 14 long years, he traveled from state to state, just looking for a ruler who would listen to him, and facing one disaster after another.
And this was not some kind of philosophical road trip, okay? This was real, life or death danger. At one point, he was mistaken for a known criminal and almost killed by a mob. A military commander literally tried to assassinate him by having a massive tree chopped down right where he was teaching. And it gets worse. In one state, he and his students were cut off from all supplies and they nearly starved to death. And all the while, ruler after ruler just turned him away. This was the reward for a lifetime of wisdom.
And this quote, this probably captures his absolute rock bottom. Can you imagine his students hearing someone describe their great teacher, this man of incredible wisdom, as a tired, homeless dog? It is just a brutal, insulting thing to say. So how do you think he reacted? With anger? Despair?
This is the moment that tells you everything you need to know about his character. He laughed. He heard the meanest, harshest criticism you could imagine, and he agreed with it. How true, he said. It shows this incredible humility and self-awareness. I mean, even at his absolute lowest point, he had the strength and the sense of humor to see himself for what he was.
His long exile eventually came to an end, and that leads us to the final and most important chapter of his life. He failed to get political power, but he was about to discover his true purpose, his real, lasting legacy.
So when he finally gets to go home, he's an old man, 68 years old. People respected him, sure, but they never gave him any real power again. The doors to politics were shut for good. But instead of just retiring, feeling defeated, he channeled all of his energy, all that wisdom he'd gained from a lifetime of struggle, into a brand new mission.
And this was his big world-changing idea,有教无类. Before Confucius, education was basically a privilege for the rich and powerful. If you were just a regular person, you had almost zero chance to learn. Confucius flipped that whole system on its head with this one simple, powerful idea. In education, there are no classes. He believed everyone had a right to learn, and he opened the doors of knowledge to all.
And boy, did the people come. It's estimated he taught around 3,000 students over the course of his life. Think about that. He couldn't get a single ruler to adopt his policies, but he inspired thousands of individuals to learn from him.
And out of those thousands, there were 72 who were like his core team. They were the ones who truly mastered his teachings. And they didn't just stay students, they became the next generation of thinkers, scholars, and even government officials, carrying his ideas all across the country. This was his real army, an army of educated minds.
So what was he actually teaching? Well, one of the core concepts was the junzi, which you can translate as the ideal person or superior person. For Confucius, being noble wasn't about your family or your bank account, it was all about your character. A junzi focuses on doing the right thing, while a petty person only thinks about what's in it for them. A junzi is also dignified without being arrogant, and maybe most importantly, they demand a lot from themselves, while a petty person is always making demands on other people. This idea is still super important in many cultures today, including right here in Singapore.
And that's the beautiful irony of his entire life, isn't it? His big goal was to fix the political problems of his tiny home state. And in that, he failed. Spectacularly. But in that failure, he found a much, much greater calling. By spending his last years teaching and preserving ancient knowledge, he didn't just change a state, he ended up shaping the entire culture of a civilization for thousands of years.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Confucius never had an army. He never sat on a throne. He never wore a crown. The emperors who came after him built massive walls and commanded huge territories. And yet, every single one of those dynasties has fallen. But the ideas of this wandering teacher, they've survived for over 2,500 years. So why is that? Maybe it's because true influence isn't about the power you hold over people, but about the inspiration you plant inside them.